If you ever thought hunger only happens to the poor, if you believe struggle was something that skipped over the middle class, then maybe it's time to take another look. Ask thousands of middle-class Americans in 2025, and they'll tell you the truth. The middle class, once the heart of America's stability, is under serious pressure, not because people stopped working hard, not because they stopped caring, but because everything around them started costing more, while their income either stayed the same or vanished with a single layoff notice. Food prices climb every month. Rent goes up, healthcare, gas, school fees, it all adds up fast. And before they know it, families who used to feel secure are suddenly having to make impossible choices. We start going to take a close look at 5 U.S. cities where the middle class is on the edge, where inflation, job losses, and quiet fears about tomorrow are reshaping lives in ways nobody wanted. You'll hear real stories. You'll see the data. And what you'll get is a clearer picture of how America is changing. This video was created to explore and understand using public information and reporting from the press. Everything you're about to see is shared for context and awareness. It is not meant to attack anyone or any organization. So, let's get started. Here, Sibins, the first city. Chicago used to be known for its cold winds. But these days, what really makes people shiver is not the weather. It is the bills. Electricity bills, gas bills, grocery bills. Every single one seems to be climbing like it is in a race to reach the clouds. And your paycheck? Still standing at the bottom, looking up like it got left behind. This is Chicago, a city that once symbolized the strength of working-class America, now quietly edging towards something a lot like economic recession. Prices keep rising, shelves keep emptying, and for a lot of families, everyday life is starting to feel strange and unpredictable. Over the last 2 years, major supermarkets like Walmart and Save-A-Lot have pulled out from working-class areas like the South Side and the West Side. That means for many people, finding fresh vegetables or a gallon of milk now requires a 5 to 10 mile trip for middle-class families without a car. The distance is not just inconvenient, it sets damaging. It leads to skipped meals, worse nutrition, and spending that feels impossible to track or control. And sure, everyone talks about how brutal Chicago winters are. But the cold is not just outside anymore. It is inside homes, in the conversations people avoid, and in the way they now approach something as simple as a trip to the store. You see it in the lines at discount stores. People scrambling to grab instant noodles, cartons of milk, like it's some twisted version of Survivor Supermarket Edition. So let me ask you, is there anyone still out there who honestly thinks the middle class is doing fine? Because here in Chicago, some families are splitting dinner portions in half. Others are cutting pills into thirds just to make prescriptions last longer. And when shelves are empty, it is not because the stores forgot to restock. It is because people rushed to buy what they could before prices rise again next week. A can of tomatoes now costs what a fancy coffee used to. And somehow, folks are standing in the aisle trying to decide whether to buy gas or ketchup. It is not just groceries, fixed costs, gas, electricity, water, insurance, all creeping up. Meanwhile, incomes, they are frozen in time. A typical middle-class family with 2 kids is spending over $3,000 a month just to cover the basics. And that is before you even get to the credit card bills, medical expenses, and tuition. Even in the neighborhoods that once felt safe and predictable, there sits a growing sense of anxiety. People who used to say, "At least we such not poor," are now quietly looking into food assistance. And when something is finally back in stock, folks are not stockpiling out of fear. They are doing it because they know from experience, if you do not buy it today, it might not be there tomorrow. Chicago used to be a city of early risers, of people who got up at 5 a.m., ready to hustle, ready to earn. But now, Even working 2 or 3 jobs is not always enough to make it to the end of the month. The gap between people with stocks, properties, and family wealth, and those barely staying afloat, is growing wider by the day. And the middle class? They are stuck in between, holding a suitcase full of unpaid bills and asking themselves a question they never thought they'd have to ask. Are we still middle class? Because if you still go to work, still have a roof over your head, but can no longer afford enough food or feel financially safe, then something is broken. And whatever made this city a stronghold for working families is starting to slip away. Chicago is not just losing its supermarkets. It is losing the promise that if you worked hard enough, you would be okay. Have you ever driven 30 minutes in the desert heat, windows down, no sweat running down your back just to grab a carton of eggs, only to walk in, stare at the empty shelves and realize, oh, turns out a whole lot of other people are just as hungry as I am? Welcome to Phoenix, where grocery shelves look more deserted than a college fridge during finals week. And every shopping trip feels like a survival challenge, hunting down a bag of rice, a bottle of detergent, or maybe just a single potato. It is a strange sight in a city that used to be the promised land for working families. Phoenix was once the go-to place for anyone looking to start over, drawn in by the dry air, affordable housing, and lower cost of living. But now, it is becoming one of the clearest examples of how the middle class is quietly slipping through the cracks. Everything is going up. Everything around us, it's just, no matter what, eggs, gasoline, all these things, and we get a cost of living increase of 1%. That right there says it all. Just look at the numbers on the bill every month. That sits the real story. In just 3 years, rent in Phoenix has shot up by more than 40%. A modest 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs now goes for nearly $1,800 a month. And the dream of owning a home, it is drifting farther out of reach. The average home price has blown past $430,000, a number that feels laughable if you're living on a fixed salary. Even families making 6 figures are struggling. Donna Dennis and her husband bring in over $100,000 a year. Still, they can't afford to live in the neighborhoods they used to think were realistic. No new car, no fancy handbags, no trips abroad, just groceries, just trying to stay afloat. And that is the story for so many in Phoenix right now. People juggling bills like it is a full-time job. Pay the electric bill today, the internet tomorrow, groceries, maybe if there is something left over next week. But the struggles don't stop there. At places like Fry Sits and Walmart, shoppers are noticing the same eerie thing, more and more empty shelves. Milk, noodles, cold medicine, even toilet paper, gone. Retailers point to clogged supply chains and backlogs coming out of California ports. But honestly, the reason stopped mattering a long time ago. All folks care about is that today, there is nothing to buy, and if there is something tomorrow, they might not have enough money to afford it. Panic buying is creeping back in, not as loud as it was during the early COVID days, but it is back, and it is very real. Frozen food, canned goods, vitamins, they vanish by the weekend. Middle-class families are stocking up, not because they are scared, but because they are tired of never knowing what tomorrow brings. They have lived too many months walking into stores and leaving with nothing. Some people even joke that you can see the wealth gap just by looking through your car window. On one side of the street, a luxury grocery store with reserved parking for Teslas. On the other, a crowded mobile home park full of families who once believed they were starting a new chapter. But the real problem in Phoenix is not sudden collapse. It is slow erosion, losing your grip little by little, losing your footing, losing faith that hard work will ever be enough again. It is heartbreaking to think that a city once seen as a fresh start is now the backdrop for the slow, silent unraveling of the American middle class. So what city do you think is next? Drop a comment below. Keep watching. because the next place we talk about might just be the same one you pinned on your dream board. Seattle, the city of coffee, tech giants, and bills stacked so high they might as well have their own skyline. If you still picture Seattle as some peaceful corner of the Pacific Northwest, maybe check a local mailbox. What you'll find are not letters from friends or postcards from the coast. It's a notification, bills, and more bills. Electricity, up, gas, also up, groceries, skyrocketing like a Tesla launching into orbit. A simple grocery bag, just the basics, bread, milk, eggs. Some greens now sets you back close to $80, and it disappears just as fast as a cup of espresso at Pike Place Market. So what is going on? Seattle used to be called the city of the future, a tech wonderland, a place where prosperity seemed built into the pavement. But now it feels like the middle class is holding on with both hands just to stop from sliding off the edge. Big names like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, all with roots in or around Seattle, have let go of tens of thousands of workers since the end of 2024. Not just coders and software developers, but the people who kept the lights on, the ones who made things run behind the scenes. One man, a former building manager in Bellevue, said, "I don't do software, but I keep the building running. When the company laid off employees, I was also let go. Since then, I still haven't found a long-term job." His wife works in private healthcare. Her hours got cut. Their oldest daughter has put college on hold. They simply can't afford it right now, and they're not alone. Living in Seattle has become a balancing act. Most people are losing. Rent for a one-bedroom now tops $2,300 a month. A dozen eggs, $8 or $9. Gas, nearly $6 a gallon. Families that used to have two reliable incomes now find themselves scraping by on one or none. And here's the kicker: even if you do have the money, it doesn't mean you'll find what you need. More and more people say they have to visit 3 or 4 different stores just to piece together a single dinner. Eggs are in one place, toilet paper in another. Sometimes you wait a week just to see meat show up on the shelf. It's like a scavenger hunt in a city powered by cloud computing and AI. Even in areas like Rainier Valley, Northgate, and Capitol Hill, store shelves go empty. Not always in dramatic waves, but in a slow, steady rhythm that feels just as unsettling. It sits not full-blown panic buying, but you can tell people are losing trust in the supply chain, instability, in the future, and the divide, it's growing wider every day. You see upscale neighborhoods buzzing with organic coffee shops and polished Teslas lining the streets. But just a few miles away, folks are working 2 or 3 jobs, getting up before sunrise and collapsing late into the night just to make rent. Seattle was supposed to be the city where you could build something, a life, a dream, a future. Now, even those who thought they were doing everything right are starting to ask, what more can I possibly do? When the ones who were once considered safe are starting to fall through the cracks, what does that say about where we are as a country? This isn't just about the poor anymore. This is about a middle class that's running out of air. And if you think things in Seattle have gotten rough, wait until you see what's happening next. Orlando used to be the dream, the place where the magic of Disney brought in millions, and thousands of middle-class families working in the service industry could build a life around the sparkle of the theme parks. But these days, that dream feels more like a nightmare for many. If you think dragons and wizards only belong in fairy tales, try sitting down with your electricity, water, gas, and internet bills this month. The numbers are creeping up every time you blink, while your paycheck barely moves, if it moves at all. The cost of living in Orlando is climbing faster than a roller coaster. Average rent is now over $2,000 a month. Gas prices are close to $5.50 a gallon. And fresh food, forget about it in neighborhoods like Pine Hills or Alafaya Park. It's getting harder and harder to find. Families that used to enjoy weekend dinners out are now pinching pennies on everything but the absolute essentials and still can't stretch their budgets far enough. At local supermarkets, shelves are empty by midweek. Sometimes, people drive 20 miles just to find a pack of diapers or a dozen eggs without being gouged on price. Cooking oil, milk, baby formula, canned goods. These vanish before the weekend even hits. Panic buying isn't just a phrase anymore, it's a survival skill. Tourists still flood the parks, Disney World, Universal Studios. They keep the lights on and the crowds buzzing. But visitors have been thinning out since mid-2024, and with fewer guests, the demand for short-term workers, the backbone of Orlando SEP's economy, has dropped sharply. Hotels, restaurants, and resorts have quietly cut back hours, shifted workers to seasonal contracts, or simply stopped calling people back. One woman who worked as a customer coordinator at a big resort said, "They didn't fire me, they just cut my shifts from 5 days down to 2. No insurance, no explanation, no apology." She sold her husband's old car just to cover rent, and still doesn't know if they'll be able to stay in the city next month. What sips even harder to swallow? Many families who still technically qualify as middle class, jobs, homes, the whole picture, are living on credit cards, personal loans, and a fragile hope that things might turn around. And if you stir middle-aged, dreaming about a calm retirement in Florida, the fine print just got a lot smaller. That dream only counts if you hit the lottery or somehow cleared all your debts years ago. Orlando isn't the fairyland it once was for workers anymore. It's a dazzling stage for tourists to enjoy. But behind the scenes, thousands of locals are wrestling with real worries about food, clothing, and simply paying the bills. So what's next on the list? Have you ever imagined a city famous for making cars would end up with empty store shelves and rent so high it feels like a trap? Stick around, you're going to want to hear this. And hey, don't forget to share and subscribe if you're feeling stuck on this big stage called life. Denver, where the mountains are breathtaking, the air is crisp, and the prices, they are sky high enough to make you think about moving into a tent. Not because you love the outdoors that much, but because rent has become completely out of reach. Once upon a time, Denver was the dream spot for middle-class folks looking for a slower pace, a bit of fresh mountain air, and a life that felt balanced. Now, residents are forced to make impossible choices, like whether to fill up their gas tank or put milk on the table because both prices just keep climbing. Thanks to a rush of people moving in mostly from pricey places like California and Texas, rent has shot up by more than 35% in less than 3 years. The average two-bedroom apartment now costs close to $2,400 a month. Meanwhile, gas, groceries, and utilities all hover well above the national average, and it's not like the paychecks are keeping up with the rising costs. Construction is slowing down because materials are more expensive. Logistics jobs are shrinking because supply chains keep breaking. And small businesses, they're squeezed by higher taxes, insurance, and customers who just don't have the spending power they used to. Denver sits shortages aren't catastrophic yet, but they center a constant frustrating cycle. At grocery chains like King Soopers, Safeway, or Walmart, things like eggs, milk, flour, and baby food tend to vanish on weekends. So people don't just buy extra, they buy early just to avoid the stress of returning to empty shelves. Prices aren't just rising, they're driving the working class to the edges. While the wealthy snap up million-dollar homes and order organic groceries from apps, middle-income families are stuck in old apartments where the only soundtrack is the snowplows outside, and the next rent hike feels inevitable. The divide is so sharp in Denver you can spot who's who just by the coffee in their hands. On one side, it's the simple brewed cup. On the other, unpaid bills that keep piling up. Even the community safety nets, Those food banks and nonprofits that Colorado has always been proud of are overwhelmed. Since early 2024, the demand for help has doubled. And the heartbreaking part, those who used to give are now the ones standing in line. Denver, a city that once seemed like the perfect blend of nature and a good life, is forcing its middle class into a terrible choice: stay and struggle or leave and try all over again somewhere else. If even people with education, stable careers, and a home in a city known for livability can get by anymore, maybe it's time America stops pretending we know what stability really means. Portland, Oregon, once the ultimate hipster paradise, full of indie bookstores, bike-friendly streets, and artisan donuts that could change your life. But now, it sets also the city where the middle class is quietly getting pushed out. Not with eviction notices, but with bills that won't stop climbing and shortages that slowly creep into everyday life. The city still has its charm: food trucks on every corner, cozy coffee shops, colorful murals that shout diversity. But under that lively surface, there's a tension you can feel if you look close enough. Families who once saw Portland as a cheaper escape from the sky-high prices of California or Seattle are waking up to the hard truth. Portland isn't the budget-friendly cousin anymore. It's become a sibling with the same expensive habits. Rents have shot up fast. A one-bedroom apartment now costs over $1,800 a month. Utilities, gas, groceries, they all keep going up too. And if you think just getting the basics is easy, think again. In neighborhoods like Lentz and Cully, people are telling me that milk, baby formula, and canned food often disappear from shelves for days. It sits not because everyone is panic buying. The supply chains are just patchy, shipments cut back, especially to what companies see as less profitable areas. So the wealthier neighborhoods get first pick, and the working class spots get whatever sips left, if anything at all. Downtown Portland is slowly picking itself up after protests, business closures, and the pandemic fallout. But many middle-class families, they're retreating, not into a cozy suburban home, but into uncertainty. Some move in with family. Others downsize to tiny homes or even live in RVs on the city outskirts. That romantic idea of keeping Portland weird has taken a darker turn, where quirky means unaffordable and being independent feels impossible. Food pantries are stretched to their limits. Schools are seeing more kids show up hungry. And for those hanging on to what sits left of their middle-class lives, it feels like Portland is turning into one long waiting list for housing, for health care, for hope. The American middle class isn't disappearing with a bang, it's fading away with 1,000 tiny cuts. And if you think Portland sits rough, wait until you hear what sits happening in Cleveland, Ohio, once the proud heart of America's manufacturing dream, a city where factories roared with life, and the middle class had a sense of security. But now, that dream feels miles away. The hum of machines has been replaced by silence, and for the middle class, that silence comes with a heavy weight: uncertainty. Job security here isn't what it used to be. The solid, steady careers in auto, steel, and manufacturing, they've given way to contract gigs, part-time retail, and unpredictable service jobs. Even folks who did everything right, got the training, kept their heads down, followed all the rules, are watching their paychecks shrink while costs keep climbing. Rent in Cleveland is still cheaper than big coastal cities, sure, but it shot up more than 20% in just 2 years. Gas prices jump around like a roller coaster. Groceries, spotty at best. People in neighborhoods like Slavic Village, Glenville, and Collinwood are facing empty store shelves, not because they hesitated, but because shipments never showed up. A former machinist, now driving Uber full-time, put it like this: "There used to be pride in being middle class in Cleveland. Now I feel like I'm hustling just to stay afloat." It's not living, it's surviving. Food insecurity is rising, and it's heartbreaking. Shelters and food banks are seeing record numbers, not just from people without homes, but from families where both parents work. People who once brought canned goods to donate are now standing in line with their kids, asking for help. Even Cleveland Clinic, one of the biggest employers around here, is an immune. Housekeeping staff. Clerical workers. Many have had hours cut or seen benefits quietly vanish. It's not just about money anymore. It's about morale. The middle class here is exhausted, not just from working hard, but from working hard and still falling behind. So what happens when you pull away the stability in a place that used to stand for American grit? You get scared, you get fatigued, and you get a growing feeling that the system isn't built for the people who actually keep it running. And Cleveland isn't set alone. St. Louis, Missouri, a city where the Gateway Arch once stood tall as a symbol of new beginnings and the promise of the American West. It feels more like a monument to something fading, a reminder of better days slipping through the cracks. For a lot of middle-class families in St. Louis, just being okay costs more every single month. Rent in neighborhoods like South City and Dogtown is creeping toward levels people never thought they'd have to face. And grocery stores, staples like eggs, rice, even bottled water show up sporadically. You might not see the chaos some coastal cities are facing, but the anxiety is just as real, just as raw. Teachers are picking up extra tutoring shifts online to make ends meet. Mechanics are driving for delivery apps after hours. Nurses are filling out applications for housing help. Folks who used to be the backbone of this community are now scrambling just to keep their heads above water. And it's not just about money, it's about trust. Trust in the idea that education, hard work, and playing by the rules would lead to security. The American promise we all grew up believing in, but here in St. Louis, that promise feels like it's unraveling. Some say this is just a phase, a bump in the road after the pandemic, but the cracks are spreading faster than anyone wants to admit. From city to city, coast to coast, what we're seeing isn't just an economic slump, it's a fundamental shift. The middle class, once a badge of pride and a promise of stability, is turning into something fragile, anxious, and desperate. So what happens when the very people who kept this country running can keep a roof over their heads, can afford the food on their tables, or make plans for the future? What happens when the American dream becomes a moving target, always just out of reach? If you start juggling rent, utility bills, and an increasingly empty fridge, you're not alone. Share this video. Drop your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real talk about what's really happening out there. Sometimes one voice is all it takes to spark change.